I smelled the garlic before I saw the plate. The ballroom shimmered under chandeliers, 100 glasses catching gold like tiny suns, and still the light couldn't warm the look on my daughter-in-law's face as she cut through the room toward me. Conversation thinned around us, sentences clipped mid-air, the way sound dies when a doctor closes a curtain. I sat where my card told me to sit, table 12, near the back, and watched my son laugh on the dance floor with his new wife, the woman in the white dress coming for me now with purpose in her step. "Mrs. Morrison," she said, loud enough for nearby tables. Perfume, champagne on her breath, a smile sharpened to a point. "Thank you for everything you've done for Felix." I folded my napkin, careful, steady. "Of course, he's my son." "Yes," she said, "and you've been such a dedicated mother." The room leaned closer. All those night shifts, all those missed plays, always so busy. The stem of my water glass looked like a thin bone between my fingers. Somewhere a fork hit a plate and didn't move again. "Rhea," I said, "this isn't the time." "Oh, I think now is perfect." She laid a hand on my shoulder. Her nails were immaculate. With the other hand, she lifted a plate from the server's tray, mashed potatoes ridged like a small hot landscape. For a heartbeat, I saw Felix as a boy in a paper crown at a school pageant, searching the crowd. Then, heat. It was the kind of heat that erases thought. The potatoes caught my cheek and mouth. The sting bloomed down my neck into the collar of my simple blue dress. Chairs scraped. Someone hissed my name. "Taste the food, old witch," she said, voice stripped of its sweetness, and I felt the room tilt, as if the floor itself had decided to step away. I did not cry. I counted, 1 breath, 2, 3. The chandeliers steadied. The silence came down like snow. A man at the bar found his voice. "Do you people have any idea who you just attacked?" he said, and his words went farther than he planned. "That's Della Morrison. She's worth over $3 billion. There is a kind of quiet that isn't quiet at all. It's arithmetic being done behind faces." Rhea's hand trembled. Phones rose. Someone whispered billion, as if it were a diagnosis. I stood. The potatoes slid from my jaw in a slow, humiliating line. My heels clicked the marble, a metronome through the hush. No one stopped me. At the door, Felix called my name, confused, afraid, but I didn't turn. The air outside tasted like rain and copper. In the cab's dark window, I could see the smear on my skin and, beneath it, the woman I'd trained myself to be. At my sink, hot water finally met hot starch and lifted it away. I dried my face and stared at the towel. That was the last time anyone would put their hands on me. They wanted to know about the money. They would learn something else entirely. What would you do if the person who married your child tried to buy your silence with shame? The towel in my hands was still damp when my phone lit up. Felix's name glowed across the screen, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Not yet. I sat in my small apartment, the hum of the refrigerator louder than any orchestra, and stared at the cracks in the ceiling. That ballroom had been filled with crystal, linen, and people pretending to be civilized. And still, it had felt lonelier than this one-bedroom box. At least here no one clapped when I was humiliated. For 3 days, I stayed silent. My skin healed from the burn, but the shame stuck like smoke in fabric. When the call finally came, Felix's voice was clipped, rehearsed, stripped of affection. "We need to talk," he said. Not mom, not "are you okay?" Just orders, like from a colleague he barely respected. "Of course," I whispered. "Neutral ground, that cafe on 5th, 1 hour." The line died before I could say his name. I dressed carefully, choosing the same blue dress from the wedding, scrubbed clean. Let them all see me plain. The cafe smelled of rain and burnt espresso. Felix arrived late, his shoulders squared like he'd been practicing in the mirror. He looked older than 32, his jaw set, his eyes searching for cracks in me. He asked it straight. "Is it true? Are you really worth billions?" I sipped my coffee, letting the steam cloud my face. Yes, the word dropped between us like a stone in water. Ripples spread. "How? Why hide it?" His voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it. So I told him, half of it anyway. The nights cleaning offices after his father died, the man who taught me real estate, the years building an empire brick by brick while he slept, thinking we had nothing. He didn't hear sacrifice. He heard abandonment. "You let me believe we were poor," he said, bitterness cutting through. "You let me scrape for scholarships when you could have written a check. Do you know what that did to me?" "I wanted you to find love that was real," I said. "Not money." He laughed, hollow. "Like Raya?" The name hit the table like glass breaking. I saw the way he flinched, but clung to her still, like a man on a sinking ship convinced it was just a storm. He left me with cold coffee and a colder silence. Outside, the rain had turned to sleet. I pressed my palm against the glass and felt the ice forming, thin, fragile, ready to crack. That night I called Marcus. 15 years I'd trusted him with my safety, with truths I didn't tell even Felix. "I need a background check," I said, quietly. 3 days later, manila folders sat heavy on my dining table. The pages smelled of ink and cigarettes. Ria Novak's face stared at me from glossy photographs. Charity galas, beach resorts, men at her side, each one older, each one wealthy, each one vanished when the money did. She wasn't careless. She was methodical, a predator dressed in lace. David Rothschild, gone with $20,000. Michael Torres, engagement broken after credit card theft. Jonathan Wright, accounts drained. No charges ever filed, but the pattern was as clear as fingerprints. I sat in silence as the rain tapped the window. My son hadn't just married a stranger. He'd married a strategy. The next day, Felix came with her. Ria wore black, her makeup soft, her eyes moist. "I owe you the deepest apology," she began, voice trembling just enough to be convincing. She spoke of love, of protection, of misunderstanding my sacrifices. Felix drank in every word. If I hadn't seen the files, I might have believed her. "Family is important," she said, squeezing Felix's hand. "Now that we know the truth about your success, we can start fresh." I smiled, the way a hunter smiles when the trap springs shut. "Of course. Family is everything." Her eyes gleamed at the mention of estate planning. She wanted in. She wanted it all. When they left, I spread the files again, tracing the timeline with my finger. She'd known about me long before that wedding. The spill in the coffee shop 18 months ago wasn't chance. She'd studied Felix, studied me, and chosen her mark. I called Marcus again. "I want surveillance, 24 hours. If she thinks I'm weak, let her believe it. But I want eyes on everything." The reports arrived daily. Ria wasted no time. Within a week, she'd scheduled an appointment at Harrison & Associates, the same firm that had chased my accounts for years. She met with a geriatric psychiatrist who specialized in competency evaluations. She was building a case before my son even suspected. Felix came alone one evening, shoulders heavy, eyes ringed with doubt. "Mom, Ria's worried about your health," he said. "My health?" I asked. "She thinks you might be having memory issues." The absurdity almost made me laugh. But I didn't. He believed her. He wanted to. "What kind of issues?" "Confusing dates, forgetting conversations." He looked down at his hands. "Mom, you're 73, living alone, sitting on billions. That's not normal." I let the words settle. "I live the way I choose." He leaned forward, earnest, desperate.
Just see a doctor. Get evaluated. Then we can all stop worrying. Of course, the doctor was hers. Of course, the evaluation was a rope around my neck. I nodded slowly, as if considering. Perhaps that would be reasonable. Felix exhaled in relief. Raya found someone. Dr. Kellerman. Great reputation. I smiled, though my stomach knotted. I'd prefer to choose my own doctor. His jaw tightened. You can't keep refusing help. Then softer, almost pleading. This is about family. About making sure you're safe. Safe from whom? I asked. From myself? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Ria's voice was already in his throat. That night, alone in my study, I laid out the photos, the files, the reports. My lamp hummed. My housekeeper's footsteps faded down the hall. I stared at Ria's smile frozen on glossy paper and felt the weight of every choice I'd ever made. Felix was slipping away, thread by thread, into her hands. If I did nothing, she would own him, body and soul. If I fought, I risked losing him forever. The clock ticked past midnight. The city outside was quiet, but inside me, a war began. I picked up the phone. Marcus, I said, accelerate the investigation and set up a meeting with the FBI. If she thinks she's the only one who can play games with power, she's about to learn who taught the game in the first place. The first time I said no to Raya, the word tasted metallic in my mouth, like blood. It began with a dinner invitation. Hers, not mine. A new apartment, downtown, high-rise with glass walls overlooking the city. Felix called it their fresh start. I knew it for what it was. A trophy case, bought with my son's willingness to believe in her. I arrived with a bottle of wine I didn't expect them to drink. The doorman smiled politely, but his eyes flickered with recognition. Everyone knew the story by now. The mashed potatoes, the billionaire, the scandal. My humiliation had gone viral in whispers long before it ever reached the press. When the elevator doors slid open, Felix was waiting. His smile was tight, his arms folded as if bracing for impact. Ria appeared a moment later, sleek in cream silk, the kind of dress that whispers money even when the tags still dangle in the closet. Mrs. Morrison, she said, her voice soft as butter. Welcome. Please, come in. Her apartment was staged like a showroom. Spotless counters, curated art, a faint scent of vanilla candles masking something more metallic. Ambition. Dinner was arranged on the table already, too perfect, as if she'd hired someone to cook and then dismissed them before I arrived. We ate in polite silence for a while. Felix tried to talk about work, about the projects at Morrison Holdings, the ones he suddenly seemed interested in since learning who I really was. I indulged him, answering with measured calm. Ria barely touched her food, her eyes darting between us like a referee waiting for the first foul. Then she leaned forward, her elbows grazing the linen. Della, I've been thinking, she began, using my first name for the first time. The audacity was deliberate. Felix and I would love to learn more about your business, about how you built it, about how you manage everything now. Felix's eyes lit up, hopeful. It could be good, Mom. No, I said. The word cut the air clean. Felix blinked. Ria froze, her smile cracking for just a moment before she rebuilt it. No? She repeated, as if testing the sound. I don't discuss my business affairs outside of my own boardroom, I said. Not with outsiders, not even family. Felix's face fell. Ria's eyes narrowed. That was the moment. The first true line I drew in the sand. She recovered quickly. Of course, I understand, she said, though her tone was dipped in sugar so thick it suffocated. I just thought, since we're family now, transparency might help us all feel closer. I laid down my fork with precision. Closeness doesn't come from balance sheets. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Felix shifted uncomfortably. Rhea dabbed her lips with a napkin she hadn't needed.
That was the first no, and it cost me. The next day, Felix called with a voice colder than steel.
Mom, Rhea feels like you don't trust her.
I don't, I said simply. There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his tone had a tremor.
She's my wife.
And she humiliated me in front of 200 people, I reminded him.
That was a mistake, he snapped. She's apologized.
She's rehearsed, I corrected. He sighed, and for a moment I heard my boy again, the child who once crawled into my lap after nightmares. I don't want to choose between you two. You won't have to, I said. The truth will do the choosing for you. But I knew the truth was slow. Lies moved faster. Lies had legs. 3 days later, the trap closed tighter. Felix showed up at my apartment, his posture rehearsed, his face pale.
Rhea and I think it's time, he said. Time to talk about estate planning.
I stood at the sink, rinsing coffee grounds from a filter, the smell earthy and grounding. Estate planning is already handled, I said.
Handled how? Handled by me.
He pressed his lips together, struggling to find the right words. Mom, you're not getting any younger. What if something happens? What if you can't? Stop. My voice was low, firm, final. I am not handing over control of my life's work to your wife. He flinched as if I'd struck him. His knuckles whitened on the back of a chair.
So, it's about her?
It's always been about her, I said. For a moment, we stared at each other, two stubborn forces locked in place. Then he turned away, shoulders sagging.
I thought you wanted to rebuild trust.
I do, I said, but trust doesn't mean surrender. He left without another word, the door closing with a hollow thud. I sank into my chair, my body trembling. Saying no had felt like standing in front of a train, bracing for impact. But I had done it, and now the tracks were humming louder. That night, Marcus called.
She's moving faster than we thought, he reported. Meeting with lawyers, whispering about guardianship, and she's scheduled another lunch with that psychiatrist.
She's building a case, I murmured.
Yes, and if you're not careful, she'll file for competency evaluation within weeks.
I rubbed my temples, the weight of years pressing down. Then we make our move first. Marcus hesitated.
Are you ready for that?
Once this starts, it doesn't stop.
I've been ready since the potatoes,
I said. The confrontation came sooner than expected. A Saturday evening, rain hammering the city like a warning. Felix and Rhea arrived together, uninvited. My housekeeper let them in, her eyes wide. Felix looked torn, weary. Rhea looked radiant, triumphant. She carried a folder under her arm like a prize.
We need to talk,
Felix said, his voice strained. I gestured to the living room, where files of my own sat hidden beneath a magazine. The game was layered now, each of us holding cards, none of us willing to show them first. Rhea began, her voice honeyed. Mrs. Morrison, we've been so concerned. We think it might be time to put some protections in place. For you, for Felix, for the family.
Protections. A beautiful word for theft.
And what protections do you suggest? I asked. She opened the folder. Documents slid across my coffee table. Guardianship forms, drafted by a lawyer with too much ambition and too little morality. Felix wouldn't meet my eyes. His silence was consent enough. I stared at the papers, then at my son, then at the woman who had turned him against me. My heart pounded, but my voice was steady. No, I said. The word carried weight this time, heavier than the first.
No, Rhea echoed, feigning confusion. No guardianship, no transfer, no control. Not now, not ever.
Her mask slipped for just a second, enough for me to see the fury coiled beneath. Felix shifted uneasily.
Mom, this isn't...
This is exactly what it looks like, I interrupted.
And I will not sign my life away because my daughter-in-law thinks I'm fragile. The air crackled. Rhea leaned forward, her smile tight. You think you're strong enough to fight this? To fight me? I've been fighting people like you my whole life, I said. Felix's head snapped between us like a spectator at a tennis match, his knuckles pressed white against his knees. The silence stretched until it snapped. Rhea gathered the papers, her movement sharp. You'll regret this, she whispered. I stood, spine straight. Maybe, but not as much as you will. When they left, Felix didn't say goodbye. He didn't even look back. The slam of the door echoed like a verdict. I walked to my study, opened the drawer, and pulled out Marcus's files. My hands shook, but not from fear, from resolve. The line had been drawn, and now the war was inevitable. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Inside, I whispered to the empty room. No, and for the first time in years, the word felt like power. The letter arrived on a gray Tuesday morning, slipped beneath my apartment door with the weight of authority. I knew before I even bent down that it bore her fingerprints. The envelope was heavy stock, embossed with the seal of a law firm too polished for decency. Inside, neat paragraphs stacked like bricks against me. A formal notice requesting medical evaluation, citing concerns about mental competence and patterns of impaired judgment observed by close family. Close family. The word stung worse than the burn of mashed potatoes. My son's name was listed alongside Rhea's. I sat at my kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator louder than my heartbeat. For years, that table had been where I balanced ledgers, plotted investments, fed my son dinners he barely remembered. Now it was a battlefield. The words blurred as I read them again. They weren't asking. They were demanding. In 30 days, if I didn't submit to an evaluation by their chosen psychiatrist, they would petition the court. My hands trembled. The page slipped, landing face up on the worn wood. A woman who could build towers of glass and steel suddenly couldn't hold a single sheet of paper. I told myself to breathe, to stay calm, to think like I always had. But fear has a way of crawling beneath logic, whispering that this time you've been outplayed. That night, I dreamed of my son as a boy, standing on a baseball field in a too big uniform. The bleachers were empty except for me, watching from the shadows of work clothes. He waved once, uncertain, and then turned back to the game. In the dream, he never looked again. I woke with tears crusted on my cheeks and the taste of metal in my mouth. For the first time in years, I felt powerless. The days blurred. My phone lit with messages I didn't answer. Felix's voice filled my voicemail, steady but distant. Raya's was there too, dripping with honeyed venom. "We only want what's best for you," she cooed. "You've worked so hard, and it's time to let go. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I stopped eating. The coffee pot grew cold on the counter. I sat in the same chair at the same table, staring at the same letter. Doubt seeped in like damp through old walls. Was I losing my mind? Had the years of solitude, the secrets, the double lives finally eroded me? I touched my hair in the mirror, found the lines on my face sharper, crueler. Maybe this was what aging felt like, not decline of the body, but erosion of trust. Marcus came on the 4th day, unannounced. He found me in the half-light, curtains drawn, papers scattered like a deck of losing cards. "Della," he said, voice firm but not unkind. "You look like hell." I almost laughed, but it caught in my throat. "Maybe that's what they want," I whispered. He picked up the letter, skimmed it, and dropped it with disgust. "They're bluffing harder than you think. This isn't airtight." "They have Felix," I said. "That's all the court will see." Marcus sat across from me, leaning forward. "Listen to me. I've seen this before. Predators create smoke and hope no one checks for mirrors. but you've got something most of their victims don't. A record. 30 years of clean transactions. A history of decisions that built an empire. That's not incompetence. That's brilliance. I shook my head. They'll spin it. Say I hid wealth because I was paranoid. Say modest living proves delusion. Or, Marcus countered, we show it proves discipline. He slid a folder from his briefcase, thick, worn at the edges. I've compiled everything. Patterns, precedents, expert testimony options, and… He paused, lowering his voice. I found a man willing to speak. One of Ria's old marks. He's ready to testify. The words landed like oxygen. Testify. Proof. Tools I could wield. Still, my hands trembled as I opened the folder. Pages of surveillance, bank statements, photographs, interviews. Evidence laid bare like bones in the sand. She's building a case against your mind, Marcus said. We'll build one against her intentions. For the first time in days, I straightened in my chair. Felix came the next evening, alone. His face was pale, sleepless shadows beneath his eyes. He didn't sit. Mom, why are you fighting this? He asked. We just want to protect you. I gestured to the stack of papers Marcus had left. Protect me or protect her? He winced. Don't do that. I have files, Felix. Testimony. Pictures of her with men who said the same words to themselves. She loves me. She's protecting me. And then they lost everything. His jaw tightened. That's in the past. No, I said, voice hard. That's a pattern. And if you can't see it, it's because you don't want to. He slammed his fist against the table, the sound sharp in the small apartment. Why does it always have to be a war with you? Why can't you just let someone help you? Because help offered with chains isn't help. But I didn't say it. Instead, I looked at him, my son, my only child, and saw the boy on the baseball field again, waving into empty stands. My voice cracked. Because I'm your mother, Felix, and I won't let her take you from me, not even if it means you hate me. He turned away, shoulders rigid, the war in him tearing him apart. Then I guess we're at war. He left, and the slam of the door reverberated through my bones. After he was gone, I collapsed against the table, the weight of his words heavier than any lawsuit. War. My son had declared it without knowing which side he was really on. For hours, I sat in silence. The city outside roared with life, but inside my walls, I was a ghost. Then I reached for the folder Marcus had left. My fingers brushed the edges, rough with use, and I thought of every night I'd worked myself raw, every meal I'd missed, every choice I'd made to shield Felix from monsters. Monsters didn't always lurk in alleys. Sometimes they wore silk dresses and said family. My hands steadied. My spine straightened. I opened the folder and let the truth spill into the room. The fire was faint, but it was there. The first flicker after days of smoke. The trap had to be set with precision. Not rage, not desperation, precision. Saturday evening, I invited them both. My voice on the phone was thin, tremulous, practiced. Felix, Ria, I think you're right. It's time I make some changes. Come for dinner, 7 o'clock. There was a pause, then relief in his voice. Of course, Mom, we'll be there. When I hung up, I called Marcus. Everything needs to be wired, I said. Video, audio, every corner of this apartment. Are you sure you want this recorded? Yes, I answered. I want the world to see who she really is. I dressed down for the role. Clothes a little too loose, makeup smudged, hair slightly unkempt. I salted the pot roast too heavily, let the vegetables soften too long. A woman losing her grip doesn't season carefully. The knock came at 7 sharp. Felix hovered in the doorway, shoulders tight. Ria entered behind him, radiant in conservative black, eyes glittering with victory. She clasped my hands as though we were allies. You look tired, Mrs. Morrison, she said softly. Are you feeling all right? I let my voice tremble. Oh, you know how it is at my age. Some days are better than others. We sat. I watched Felix attempt to swallow the pot roast, his loyalty outweighing his taste buds. Rhea nibbled delicately, waiting for her moment. It didn't take long. "Have you thought more about estate planning?" she asked gently, her napkin brushing lips that never truly smiled. I pushed food around my plate. "I have. It frightens me. All those numbers, all those accounts. So overwhelming." Her eyes lit, a spark quickly hidden. "That must be difficult. Maybe Felix could help. He's so good with financial matters." Felix shifted uncomfortably. "If you want, Mom, I could look over things." I reached for his hand, my fingers shaky. "Would you? That would be such a relief. In fact, I've decided. I want to transfer most of my assets now, while I can still make choices." Dr. Kellerman explained it's common, given my age. Felix's fork clattered against his plate. "Mom, that's hundreds of millions of dollars."
Tears welled in my eyes on cue. I've been a terrible mother, always working, always gone. I want to make it right. For you, for Raya, for your future children. The word children landed like a jewel on the table. Rhea's smile widened. She leaned forward, voice soft, triumphant. "That's very wise. So many wait too long and then it's too late." "Exactly," I whispered. "Better this way. I was thinking perhaps 60% liquid assets in a trust, with Felix as beneficiary and you as co-trustee, Rhea." Her mask slipped just long enough for me to see raw greed gleam in her eyes. She recovered quickly. "Of course, that's very practical." Felix looked torn, hope and confusion warring on his face.
"Mom, are you sure?"
"I'm sure," I said. "But one condition. My lawyer insists our conversation be recorded. Legal protection. To prove I'm making this decision freely." For a fraction of a second, she froze. Then greed smothered caution. "Complete transparency is always best," she said smoothly. I smiled, and the cameras hidden in the walls smiled back. After they left, Marcus appeared from the shadows of the back room, gathering equipment.
"We got it all,"
he said, holding up a drive the size of my thumb. "Good," I answered. "Send it to Agent Chen, tonight." The call came Tuesday morning. FBI agents had knocked on Rhea's door before dawn. I knew the sound, the 3-rap rhythm that carries finality. By 6 o'clock, she was in custody. Felix called, his voice shredded.
"They arrested her, Mom. They showed me documents, recordings, other men she did this to. God,
His voice cracked.
She told me she was pregnant."
The silence on the line was heavy. "Was she?" I asked quietly.
"No, fake test," they said, bought online."
I closed my eyes. Relief and sorrow tangled in my chest. Hours later,
Felix stood in my doorway, pale and trembling, eyes ringed with sleeplessness. He looked like a man hollowed out. "How long have you known?" he asked.
I gestured to the sofa.
"Since the day after your wedding."
He dropped into the cushions, his head in his hands.
"You could have told me."
"Would you have believed me?"
His silence was answer enough.
We spoke for hours, about the debts his father left, about the empire I'd built, about the scholarship foundations, the trust fund waiting for him at 40. I told him about the apartment across from his elementary school, the one I'd bought so I could watch him at recess when I couldn't be there in person.
"You were watching me?"
His voice cracked, boyish and broken. "Every day I could. I saw you score your first goal. I saw you fall off your bike and get back up. I saw you defend a boy from bullies." My throat closed. "I was there, Felix. Maybe not in the way you needed, but I was always there." Tears spilled down his face. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted you to be proud of your own life, not my money." He shook his head, grief and anger colliding.
"And Raya found me anyway."
"Yes," I said softly, "but now we know who she really is." 2 weeks later, the courtroom smelled of varnished wood and stale coffee. Rhea sat at the defense table, wrists chained, still trying to look regal. Felix sat beside me,
pale but steady. The prosecutor laid out the evidence, recordings of her coaxing me to sign over assets, testimony from past victims, fraudulent tests. The jury watched, silent, as the mask she'd worn so well disintegrated under the fluorescent lights. When my own footage played, the dinner table, her voice urging me to transfer millions while calling it responsible, Felix flinched. He turned to me, eyes wide with disbelief, then shame.
"She was going to ruin me," he whispered. I placed my hand over his. "No," I corrected gently. "She was going to ruin us." Ria's gaze found mine across the room. Cold, calculating, still defiant. But in her eyes, I saw something new. Fear. When court recessed, Felix and I stepped into the hallway. He leaned against the wall, looking smaller than he had in years.
"What do I do now, Mom? How do I start over?"
I studied him, my son, the boy who'd once waved into empty bleachers.
"You start by remembering who you are without her, and then you build again. This time, with truth."
He swallowed hard, nodding.
"I want to learn, Mom, about the business, about everything. No more secrets."
"Then come to the office tomorrow," I said. "It's time you saw what I've been building for you."
For the first time in months, his eyes shone with something other than pain. Determination.
The war was over, not without scars, not without loss. But in the wreckage, something new had begun.
Sometimes protecting family means playing the villain. Sometimes it means letting them hate you until the truth sets them free. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the truth gives them back to you. 6 months later, sunlight slanted across my desk, warming the piles of quarterly reports spread between Felix and me. The hum of the air conditioner, the scratch of his pen, the low murmur of investors' voices drifting from the conference room. It was all ordinary, almost boring, and it felt miraculous. He sat across from me now, not as a stranger under Ria's spell, but as my partner. The sharpness that once belonged to her voice had dulled into silence behind prison walls. The sparkle in Felix's eyes wasn't born of infatuation anymore. It was focus, determination, the fire of a man finally building something real. "The Portland development is ahead of schedule," he reported, flipping a page, "and the Sustainable Housing Initiative has pulled in twice the investors we projected." "Good," I said. "What about the scholarships?" "Fully funded through the next decade. Over 200 students already accepted." He smiled faintly, proud. "That's the part I like best."
I watched him for a long moment, seeing not the boy on the baseball field, not the man blinded by a predator's charm, but someone new, someone whole. "You're good at this," I said quietly. He looked up, surprised. "I had a good teacher." I smiled, but the weight of the journey pressed behind my ribs. Every choice I had made, working nights, missing birthdays, hiding wealth, staging dinners with hidden cameras, had carried a price. And for the first time, I wondered if I would have had the courage to pay it all over again, if I'd known how much it would cost. But then I saw Felix's face, steady, alive, free, and I knew the answer. Raya had been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted exploitation of the elderly. She'd entered court draped in black like a widow mourning her own future. When the judge spoke the verdict, she didn't flinch. Only her eyes shifted, scanning the room for one last target. They landed on me. Even in shackles, her stare was sharp. But I met it with calm. Predators thrive on fear. I gave her none. Dr. Kellerman had lost her license and was facing charges of her own. Felix's marriage had been annulled, legally erased as though it had never existed. He'd told me it felt strange, like scrubbing his memory with bleach. Painful, but necessary. The world had moved on, but inside me, the echoes lingered. One evening, Felix and I walked along the river. The city lights shimmered on the water,
long trails of gold and silver bending with the current. He carried 2 coffees, handed one to me, and for a while we didn't speak. Just the sound of footsteps, water lapping against stone, the thrum of traffic overhead. Finally, he said, "I still don't know how to trust myself. I thought I was smart. I thought I could read people." "You're human," I said. "Wanting love isn't a flaw." He stared at the river, his breath a cloud in the cold. "Sometimes I wonder if I only wanted her because she hated you. Like it was rebellion, not love." "Maybe," I said softly. "But love and rebellion both look like fire from a distance. You don't know which until you touch it." He was quiet, then asked, "Will you ever forgive me for believing her?" I slipped my arm through his. "Already did, long before you asked." Later that night, in my apartment, I sat alone with the silence. My empire stretched across cities, but my true victory was smaller, more fragile, the bridge rebuilt between mother and son. I thought of all the years I had hidden behind work, letting absence masquerade as sacrifice. I thought of Ria's voice, venom wrapped in silk, convincing him I had abandoned him. And I thought of the boy in the baseball uniform, waving into empty stands. "Not empty anymore," I whispered. Sometimes being a mother means playing the villain in your child's story until they're ready to see you as the hero. Sometimes it means letting them hate you if it keeps them alive long enough to heal. And sometimes, if grace allows, it means standing beside them when they finally understand. The truth is simple. Love without respect is just noise, and family without honesty is only theater. I built towers from steel and glass, but the real empire is here, in trust restored, in the quiet moments when my son finally looks at me and sees not a ghost of absence, but a mother still standing. If you've listened this far, I want to leave you with a question. What would you do if protecting the person you love most meant they might hate you forever? Could you bear the weight of that choice? I hope you'll share your story. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because every city, every voice, carries lessons we all need. And if stories like mine speak to you, stay with us at Roots and Secrets. Share, subscribe, and keep this circle of truth alive. Because family isn't always about blood. It's about who shows up when the storm comes. Thank you for walking this road with me.